Welcome to Beginning Ham Radio, sponsored by the Portland Amateur Radio Club. And this week's topics, antenna restrictions. So I put this slide up. This has been talked about a lot in ham radio, probably in the last 7 to 10 years. ARRL and some other groups got together and they wanted to try to get a federal law, or at least a recommendation, on amateur radio antenna placement in places that are governed by either the city or other local authorities, but also by HOA and places that have CCNRs or rules and regulations basically on what color you can paint your house, if you can have your garage door open after 7 p.m., things like that. A lot of people have been moving into HOA living areas where they are specific rules that ban amateur radio antennas outright or put severe restrictions on them. So the PRB-1 was the model bill that was going through Congress for many, many years. I think it finally passed, but with a lot of compromises in them. And so one of those is that local, as you can see down there, that local governments must reasonably accommodate amateur operations in zoning decisions as documented by the partial preemption called PRB-1. So that kind of the meat of the law is that an amateur station antenna structure may be erected at heights and dimensions sufficient to accommodate effective amateur service communications. See the specific wording later in the chapter. Local authorities may adopt regulations pertaining to placement, screening, or height of antennas if such regulations are based on health, safety, or aesthetic considerations and reasonably accommodate amateur communications. So it's not the silver bullet I think everybody was looking for being able to put up effective antennas that some people may consider ugly. But the thing is, this really only applies to local authorities, including cities, counties, states. When it comes to HOAs and other places that have CCNRs, because they're entered into voluntarily, they're often extremely restrictive, and PRB-1 doesn't really apply in those cases. So essentially, if you're signing up to an HOA, or if you live in an HOA that restricts antennas, that's kind of when you have to, well, you can't put up any visible antennas typically, or they're very small. So you just basically have to become very creative in the antennas that you put up. Does anybody here live in an HOA or a place that restricts antennas?
I do. This is Brian Kidder.
Hey, Brian.
I searched one out. I prefer only to live in an HOA because my family growing up were hoarders and junkers.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I live in a neighborhood, single family homes with a beautiful neighborhood, and it's an HOA that takes care of the properties. Our CCNRs from 1977 banned clotheslines and antennas back in the day. But since we've changed them to say, hey, solar devices, such as solar panels, and which also means clotheslines, are now accepted if they're not visible. And then in the 90s, when satellite dishes came out, we said you can have satellite dishes, but you need to get approval from the architectural committee on where it is, the least obtrusive, least visible place for them. After last week's meeting and hearing Fred talk, I put my 8-foot vertical mast up on my vent pipe on the back of my house, and I took a picture and sent it off to the architectural committee. And I'm the president, mind you, of the association, right? And I said, hey, I need you guys to look at this and approve it. And they're like, well, the over-the-air law from the FCC doesn't cover ham radio antennas. And I was like, what? But they're right. So I'm now in the delicate dance with them to make it unobtrusive looking to camouflage it as I can, and get them to not say no. They won't say yes, but as long as they don't say no, I'm going to be good.
Yeah, and so you bring up a good point. So I think it was back in the mid to late 90s that the FCC basically said you can't disallow dish antennas or other types of antennas like over the air antennas where if you can be reasonable or can be reasonably accommodated, then they can put them in an unobtrusive or non-visible area. And then later, a couple of years later, that was actually even extended to renters because that didn't necessarily cover renters. I remember when I moved to Maryland, I lived in a townhouse. It was a 3-level townhouse. And there were a lot of people that put up dish antennas on the balcony. And so they would just secure them to the balcony railing. It's an odd place for it, but it was a way that they could put up these antennas without drilling into the side of the condominium or anything like that. And so for better or for worse, I guess it allowed people to get dish type TV and entertainment without being completely shut off from that channel. However, yes, you're absolutely right. It doesn't apply to ham radio. So the vent pipe that you're saying you're attaching an antenna to your vent pipe, is that right?
That's right. I found one on
Okay.
the back of the house. You can only see it coming down the hill, not going the other direction, and it's not visible from the street, from the front of my house. So I have those arguments to my advantage.
No, that's great. And a lot of what people do when they are living in HOAs is that they don't necessarily ask for permission first, but what they'll try to do is just make it as hidden as possible.
Right.
So yeah, and as an example would be, the vent pipes that are coming off of the roof of your house, they would actually put something that looks like a vent pipe, but it's actually, for example, a 2-meter or a dual band antenna. So yes, it is a little bit taller. And if you really knew what you were looking for, you would notice, maybe it's 2 feet taller than it should be. But that's kind of an example of a hidden antenna.
I may shift gears and try to sell this off as this is a brand new HD TV antenna. It receives broadcast TV. And I think they'd be willfully duped.
Yes, there are a lot of new antennas that have come out over the years, from the flat patch type antennas to obviously the newer small dish antennas were a big leap forward from the 16-foot C-band antennas that of yesteryear. No, that's good. Anybody else have experience with antenna restrictions?
Hello, Max.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Roger Word. And I live in a high-rise downtown, and they basically have rules about that you're not supposed to put stuff out on the balconies, anything that protrudes, and the clotheslines, and kind of standard boiler. But excuse me.
No, I just turned on my computer and there was something playing.
Oh, okay, I didn't do it. Anyway, it's an interesting gradual negotiation, but I can get up on the roof with a handheld, and there's also a kind of a steel pergola that makes a great ground plane for a mag mount antenna. So everything I do up there is temporary, and that hasn't really created a fuss. In fact, it's become kind of a curiosity for some of the other residents. First guy that noticed me up there said, "Well, are you a spy?" And it lets them learn a little bit about some of the city emergency prep work.
So what's the antenna that's behind you in that picture?
Right. I put that there. That's I think a folded dipole for our staff walkie-talkies.
Gotcha.
And UHF, and the several people have been very receptive to the idea of possibly having us put up a ham-wan antenna. Herb and Ken have been here, and we can see Larch Mountain in Washington from the roof. So that's pending, and I'm waiting to hear more particulars from Ken as to something in a form that I could present to the management. It's funny that when that came up, I just had a chance hallway conversation with our CEO, and his first concern was whether the city is going to give him a hassle about the way it looks. And I think that's high enough up. That's probably, particularly where we already have one antenna, I don't think that's going to be an issue, but he's had to deal with them about some things like awnings to provide sunshades for people. How many meetings with the city council do you want to have over one umbrella or something like that? So he's got that reason. So what the interesting point, I guess, is just that it's a kind of gradual process of a negotiation, maybe a little bit of accretion, where people. So I haven't done anything with high frequency up there, and I think that's a little more of a challenge. Stringing long wires and so forth becomes a little more of an issue in a variety of ways. And then, of course, you want to be very cautious about the RF exposure and any kind of high voltage hazard, and obviously quite important that nothing goes over the edge of the building and becomes a skewer. So it's a unique environment. That's my situation. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Roger.
I have a couple of comments here. If you want to hide an antenna for 2 meters, that's kind of the easiest one to hide, because there are small antennas, and you can look at online. You Google for flower pot antenna. and yeah, it's just a vertical antenna. It's in the PVC, inside the PVC pipe. People usually, what they do, they put some fake plant around, so when you have that on your balcony, it looks like a plant, but in fact it's an antenna. You can do the same thing with if you look for headphone antenna. It's a J-pole inside the PVC pipe. It's a little bit longer than the flower pot antenna, but it still works. It's something that is easy to hide. And then for RF exposure, if you are transmitting with 100 watt and more, that's going to be more a problem. The higher you go in frequency, the more it's going to be a problem. So on HF, unless you're transmitting with the 1000 watt, it should be okay. Depending on your antenna you're using, but it should be okay. I put that in between quotes. But if you're transmitting with on 2 meter or 440 with 100 watts, that the RF exposure will become more of a problem, and you need to be careful with that.
Yeah, thanks. Lots of little particulars and kind of gradual. What I'm doing right now works pretty well for the VHF and UHF. Just stick a portable antenna up there. But when you spoke about flower pot, I thought of a situation I happened to notice in another high rise not far from where I am, where a flower pot actually fell off of the roof. It was going pretty fast by the time it hit the ground. So there was quite a distribution of the contents of the flower pot. It's maybe radial spray pattern of 20 or 30 feet. You wouldn't have wanted to be under that flower pot, but lots of things you can do. So thanks.
Yeah, it's amazing when you kind of Google around, as Fred suggested, the things that you can see, kind of like what other people have done. So this is an Ed Fong antenna here that's mounted onto the side of a house, and just like that, it's an antenna, but you put a flag on it, and then suddenly it's a flagpole and not an antenna. So it kind of depends on what's allowed and what's not allowed. And Fred had mentioned, and we'll kind of get into this a little bit more later on in the presentation, but the power that you're using, the band that you're using, can make it either really easy or a little bit more challenging to try to get a stealth antenna set up.
Yeah,
Anybody else?
Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Roger.
No, well, just a final footnote on my own situation, that it's everything I'm doing up there on the roof. It's a common area, so it's used by people for a lot of other purposes. We have people doing gardening up there, and they have dinner parties, and so it's quite comical to see me trying to string an antenna over a dinner party.
Yes. Yep.
But people have been pretty tolerant, and so we're doing all right now. But it's a gradual process of kind of desensitizing.
Yes.
So thanks.
Yeah, high rises can be even more challenging than just condos or houses with HOA or CCNRs, just because usually high rises are made out of metal. There's not a lot of open horizontal space that you can do things with. We have another member that lives in Portland in a high rise condo, and he does have a balcony. Unfortunately, it's all made of metal. And there's kind of, it's one of the balconies where on one side there's a huge metal wall. So even if you were successful at putting up even a small antenna, he has a great reflector that's behind him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another challenge. It's like, he has to either accept the direction that the is open or go up in height to get up and above the that wall. Unfortunately, that would make it a lot more visible. So, but thanks for telling us your story, and let us know if you come up with any good ideas.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool. Anybody else with restrictions or challenges in putting up antennas? I just say that for the most part, I've lived either on a lot of land or in my own house without any restrictions for putting up antennas. That being said, when I went to college, that changed significantly because even dorm rooms is very difficult to operate HF radios out of, and that's kind of when you either start or join the ham radio club, and hopefully they have better antennas, or what a lot of people are doing now is rather than just working at home, they're doing the SOTA or POTA, or basically taking their radio out to where they can string up temporary antennas. So that's always one option, but sometimes it's not as convenient, because if there's a contest on a weekend in the dead of winter, you don't necessarily want to go out into the park and set up your station there.
So it depends on what you want to do, but there is a lot of people are also, what they're doing is they're using digital mode like D-Star, C4 FM. So you don't need any antenna. You just need to have you can do that with your phone, but it's more fun when you do that with the radio. You just need a Raspberry Pi with a hat, and then you can connect to repeaters around the world and talk to people all over the world, with a better chances and better quality than with HF.
That's very true. With the internet and mixing internet with ham radio, we have more opportunities today than we've ever had. The other thing, since we're mentioning other alternatives, is remote ham radio and other types of remote ham programs. So this one is probably one of the largest ones. They've started many years ago, putting up these massive towers all over the world. And you can, it's a subscription-based service that for either $100 a year for a lot of the basic stations that are usually 100 watts and below, and some simple antennas, or the next level is the $1,000 a year, which gives you access to all their stations and a lot of the Yagis and things like what you're seeing here. And then it's a per minute basis. So it's not cheap, but at the same time, if you ask yourself, well, how much does it cost me to get a very nice HF radio and put up all the antennas and things? So this is just one more alternative that I actually think would be great if I were to live in an apartment or in a high rise where I just couldn't get anything out. So I kind of put some thoughts down on this slide as far as coming up with stealth antennas. Like where do you even get started? Google is definitely your friend when it comes to finding out ways that you can put up antennas that aren't obvious to your HOA board. If you wanted to do this, so, and Fred, you can help me out here a little bit if you want, but if you're using wire and you're connecting that wire to your coax and then the coax to the radio, typically you do want to use a 4-to-1 ball-in for connecting that. The other thing that you want to look at, especially if you're using things like end-fed half wave, or if you're using kind of a radiating element plus a counterpoise, you want to definitely use ferrite beads or ferrite rings or poor man's ball-in, which is kind of 6 or 7 turns of coax kind of in a loop and then zip tied together. And that'll keep the common mode energy off the coax that's going into your shack and into your radio. It's not really a safety issue at 5 watts or QRP, but it's more of like it'll help you tune up your antenna a lot better if you keep that common mode energy out of the shack. But when you get up 50, 100 watts or more, you definitely want to keep that energy out, because that actually can get kind of dangerous.
I can say something on the common mode current.
Yeah.
So at 100 watts, it's not that is dangerous. You may get RF burn if your installation is very, very badly done, but it should be okay. But the problem with the common mode current is when you're transmitting with 100 watts, your Nest at home will start to turn on and off the AC, for example. If you have some lights or your microwave or things like that, they may get some RF and they may start to act out. Anything with electronic, they may act out. So that's why you want to eliminate the common mode current, because otherwise you may have other problems in your house. But the main reason why, as a ham radio, the main reason why you want to eliminate the common mode current is because the common mode current is responsible for 90% of the noise you're going to hear on your radio. So if you have if you're on HF and you have a S7, S8 of noise, you will not be able to work anyone, especially right now. If you eliminate the common mode current on your antenna, you put you put a good balun, several good balance on your feed line, then your noise level may drop from S7 to S2 or S3, which is way more comfortable. And that with S2, S3, you can make some interesting contacts.
Yeah, thank you. And then as far as like information for using ferrite beads or ferrite rings that you can then loop the coax through, as I remember, it's a polymer. Give me just a second.
Yeah, you can. If you know what to buy, you can buy that anywhere. I get mine on eBay to do some testing, and or from Mauser. They're way more.
Mauser, yep.
Yeah, they're cheaper than polymer.
Yes.
But the problem is you need to know what you're buying, basically. So if you're a beginner and you want to do that, just get up Palomar. It's Palomar, the name. Yeah, it's get them there. It's going to be way easier. There is an explanation on what to get for what what usage, what frequency, etc., etc.
Yeah, because each of these will kind of tell you a little bit more about like what they do, and there is a section in here on information. So take a look at this website. There was also a recent podcast, the Ham Radio Workbench, that talked a lot about the different mixes of ferrite beads and cores. Cool. let me switch back here.
And the more turn you're going to put doesn't mean the better your choke is going to be.
Yeah, is it? Yeah, there's kind of a law of diminishing returns where you actually do. You'll be worse off if you go above 4, 5, 6 turns. So one of the other things that I've done in the past is to use a wire that is not necessarily as visible as like the 14 gauge wire that a lot of people use for legal limit, especially if you're using 100 watts or less. You don't need a very big core wire. So there is some stuff called polystealth. And this is the type of wire that they use for a lot of the portable or pack antennas. And it's really nice because it is stranded. It's very tough. They usually put some type of Kevlar thread through it so that not only it can act like the antenna wire, but it can also act as its own support. So a good place to get that is Davis RF. And so it's called polystealth. And let me just switch back over to the web browser. And they have different sizes here. So anything from 13 gauge up to 26 gauge. And if you're using just kind of a more permanent stealth antenna, the 18 or 22 gauge would work just fine if you're using 100 watts or less. And you can buy it by the foot or you can buy it in larger spools. The other suggestion is that you may want to cut the antennas for the bands you want to operate on. This may be able to, one way that you can eliminate using a tuner or at least an external tuner. Most radios come with an internal tuner today that can tune 3 to 1 or less, which isn't a whole lot. But if you do cut and kind of trim your antennas so that they are resonant on, for example, 40 meters and 20 meters, which is the 2 most popular bands, then you don't necessarily need a lot of extra equipment. If you do want to use a tuner, one suggestion is to use the tuner at the antenna and not at the transmitter, because then you don't have to correct the, or you don't get the loss in the coax cable that you would if you were to take an antenna that is not cut for the specific band, then you get a lot more loss in the coax cable. So a couple of the antenna tuners or remote antenna tuners, the SG230, which is kind of a heavy duty, I think it can do up to 250 watts, is in the upper right-hand corner. This is a weatherproof antenna that you would put at the bottom or at the feed point of your antenna, and then you would put coax to it. And what it would do is then it would automatically tune the antenna once it senses that there's an SWR mismatch. The other one, it's a newer one, the LDG RT100, and the antenna tuner's on the left-hand side, and then the remote is on the right-hand side. And the neat thing about this is that it actually supplies DC power from the remote, which is in your shack, to the antenna tuner, which is at your feed point. And so you don't need any extra cables or wires to go to the antenna tuner. And the other thing you could do is just consider using temporary antennas. So Roger, he was talking about using an antenna only when he was up on his rooftop. This is a great way that you don't necessarily have to use bolts or other ways to secure your antenna. You can kind of put it up when you're, for example, on the rooftop or in your backyard, and then you can take it down. I think, Brian, you were talking about using a temporary antenna, is that right?
Brian went away.
Yeah.
Oh, there, no, here is. Sorry. No,
Oh.
I have an 8-foot mast from, I think it's Comet, from Ham Radio Outlet on my vent pipe.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it's more of a permanent antenna.
Yes.
Okay. So there are, and I didn't put any pictures in here, but there are fishing poles that range anywhere from $30 all the way up to like $400 for the super heavy duty, it's never going to break fishing pole. And you can find them on eBay, Amazon, other places like that. Let me just pull one up from on eBay here. And usually if you search for a squid pole, they're made of typically fiberglass.
Good bull.
And they're in sections. And I don't see any that I'll have to give you another kind of keyword to search for. Fred, do you remember what they're?
I'm going to share my screen if you
Yeah.
don't mind.
Yep, give me just a second.
Yeah.
There you go.
Sorry, technical difficulties.
Oh, no problem.
Can you guys see?
Yep.
So look at Jack Kite. They're pretty sturdy. They're not super expensive. They're not for ham radio per se, but they're sturdy because farmers are use those poles to put a kite with a bird or something like that as a scarecrow for in their field. So they're kind of sturdy poles. They're a little bit big, so if you want to do SOTA activation, they're kind of big and heavy for that. But for your house, it's a reasonable price.
Yeah, and this particular one that you're looking at is 28 feet. And I've seen some that go all the way up to 50 feet. The last couple of sections are pretty darn thin, but at the same time, if you're using thin gauge wire, it doesn't really matter. You don't necessarily need to have the wire right next to the pole. In fact, it might be better if it's not, if it contains anything that might, interfere with the radio or interfere with the radiation pattern rather.
You don't want a pole that is carbon fiber.
Yep.
You want fiberglass, but not carbon fiber, because carbon fiber is like putting a metallic pole.
Yeah. And these poles are pretty easy to either use temporarily by just pulling out each section and then locking it in. But I've also seen people actually use them on a permanent basis. You definitely want to use some of the better built ones. And they do that by either using some type of glue to kind of permanently glue or lock the sections together, or I've seen other people drill small pilot holes and actually put small screws in to kind of lock and keep the sections together.
The best way is to use hose clamps.
Yeah, hose clamps. That's a good idea.
You secure them, you put a hose clamp, so like that. So the problem, if you glue them, you will never take it apart, and if you start drilling holes, you may weaken the structure of the pole. But if you put a hose clamp with some rubber thing, it's gonna hold pretty well.
Another source that I've purchased through is Soda Beams, and they are over in the UK. However, you can actually either purchase it through the UK store or DX Engineering also sells a lot of their equipment that they have. And so this is a telescopic mast that's either 7 or 10 meters high, and it ranges in prices between, let's see, the 7 meter looks like it's going to be 28.13. I'm sorry, 23.44, since we're in the US, we don't have to pay the VAT tax, or the 10 meters is $42. And these are actually, they're made really well. they would definitely last a long time. And a lot of people that do SOTA activations will use these type of poles because they're very easy to break down. And I don't know if this one says what the collapsed size is, but they have one I know that is just over 2 feet. So you could either, if you are considering doing SOTA activation, you can very easily put that on your backpack. So because they're generally used temporarily, it would be very easy, like in, not super rainy weather, but somewhat nice weather, to go out there, hook the antenna or the antenna wire onto the top section and just kind of put that mast up and either secure it to either a post. Bungee cords work really well. So that's one idea, to put up just a temporary antenna that can come down before HOA notices. And like Fred mentioned earlier, you can definitely hide antennas in planters. I saw one that looked like a wall lattice. So, something that the plants grow up, but they actually hid wire in there for different bands. So essentially it's a vertical antenna. So you would need to have radials. And when you put radials on an antenna, a lot of people bury them, and that's great because then you can run your lawnmower over it and you don't worry about tripping. But when you bury radials, they aren't as effective as radials that are elevated. Plus, you need a lot more of them. So a lot of the antennas that are used by people that do SOTA are elevated radials because they only use either 1, 2, or 3 at the most. Just something easy to put up. And elevated doesn't have to be very high. Obviously, make sure that you mark out where they are so people don't walk into them, but they could only be like 1, 2, 3 feet high.
Max, can I share my screen? I'm going to show an antenna for HOA. I just thought of that antenna.
Yeah.
Here.
Fred, while you're looking, can I say that my experience on the board is they're looking for a reason to say whatever, fine. So make it easy for them to say yes, fine, whatever.
So that's the flamingo and the flower looks like a sculpture, but they are in fact antennas.
That's brilliant. That's genius.
Yeah, and who can say no to art, right?
Yeah.
That's great. Does it say what the actual flamingo is made out of?
It's aluminum, probably.
Is it part of the antenna, or is it just decoration?
It's the entire flamingo is the antenna.
Okay.
And the flower is the same thing. Is the the stem of the flower and all the flower, the leaves and everything. They're the antenna. The only thing, if you are transmitting with 100 watt, you don't want to have kids going there and starting touching that thing.
Yeah. And QRP is or low power, probably under 50 watts, can be challenging. It is getting better though with the uptick of the solar cycle. So in the next few years, we may not get a very high sunspot solar cycle, but it should be a little bit easier. And it may even open up more bands like the 10 meter and 15 meter band.
If you want to have, if you want to work HF and you want to have a permanent antenna and you're not in a high-rise building, you should look at a flagpole antenna. That's what the people are, because there is a federal law that you cannot, prevent people from displaying the American flag. So the people, what they're doing is they're in their front yard or backyard, they're putting a flagpole. It's either 27 foot or 43 foot. And basically at the base of the flagpole, you have an antenna tuner like the MFJ you showed before, and that's your antenna. And they work pretty well.
That might be a good negotiating tool to say, look, give me this mast antenna or you're going to see a flagpole.
Do they allow flagpoles in your HOA?
They can't say no to some things, right?
Yep.
Yeah, they cannot say no to a flagpole.
Now, I've heard this in the early 90s, and so that was kind of before a lot of information was on the internet. So I have not actually looked this up, but it was my understanding that Celebrations, which is a Disney-owned or themed HOA community in Florida, was disallowing flagpoles that actually had antennas in them. So even though it looked like a flagpole and you would never be able to tell that there was an antenna in it, if the HOA found out that there was an antenna in it, they would actually make you take it down. So it depends on kind of like how strict your HOA is. Brian, it sounds like your HOA is definitely willing to listen.
We're hands off because I think we're single family homes.
Yeah.
Townhomes and condos, I think, are much weirder.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's all.
Some of the HOA, I think the people who are running some of the HOA, they have a power trip or something like that because they say no to everything.
Yes.
We're volunteers and when we're busy, we don't want any hassle at all.
I lived in Foster City, which I guess evidently made the news probably 15 years ago, and it may have been more than that, when there was a ham radio operator that put up a tower, and he was willing to fight it all the way as far as he could go in the court system. Ultimately, he, like most court cases, neither kind of won nor lost. They allowed him to put a wire antenna no higher than his fence line, but he had to take down his Yagi on the tower.
Pick your battles, man. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So for types of antennas, and we went through a couple of these, vertical antennas with elevated radials are a really great option if you can. Fan dipoles are nice because oftentimes if you make them with thin wire or you place them in areas that you can't necessarily see from the front of your house or the public can't see, fan dipoles allow you to use kind of one antenna structure or support, but allow you to use antennas that are cut for specific bands, mostly eliminating the need for an external antenna tuner. Another really popular one is the end-fed half-wave, because the end-fed and even the dipole antenna don't necessarily need to run in a straight line. So you can support an end-fed with it just in the middle or on just one side, or if you can on all three sides. When I lived in Foster City, I had an end-fed half-wave antenna that went through a tree on one side and then a mast on the other side. And it worked okay. One thing that you have to keep in mind is that you really do need a counterpoise of some type and a connection to ground, like a ground rod, if you're going to use an end-fed half-wave. If you don't, what'll end up happening is that it will use the coax as the other half of the antenna, which isn't necessarily completely bad, but you do need to have about 16 feet or more of coax. And again, you would definitely want to use some type of choke on that so that the RF doesn't get into the shack. A loop antenna is another idea. I've heard of a lot of people put loop antennas around their house. The speaker that we had this last Monday did not recommend that, just because your house usually contains a lot of electronic systems, anything from wall warts to microwaves and other gadgets that are connected to the internet. So you may get a lot of noise in that particular loop antenna. It'd be much better to put it around your fence or around an area in your backyard. I've also heard of people that just will try to energize anything such as your gutters, or other metallic objects. There is a contest that was started by the ham radio Reddit group that was a bed spring contest where you would hook your radio up to a set of bed springs, and then you would just try to see how many people you could contact with that. It's definitely not a very efficient antenna, but it's more of a challenge thing. The speaker that we had last Monday talked about using a light bulb or light bulbs to as antennas, and they really don't work well. It's really the other station that has the larger antenna and the higher power that really helped him make contacts with suboptimal antennas. So these are kind of some just suggestions. Fred, did you have anything other that you would suggest for somebody that had?
So the thing is, everything depends on what you want to do, because if you want to have fun and experiment with things, you know, a light bulb or a mattress spring antenna, I mean, it will work. You can make some contacts, but if you want to do DX and you want to have the DXCC award, you will never get it with those antenna. So it all depends, you know, what band you want to work, what kind of operation you want to do, and what you want to do. But I have a few comments about your antenna you put here. So vertical antenna, it doesn't have to be elevated radials. If you put your antenna on the roof, a vertical antenna on your roof, you need to have elevated radials, but they need to be tuned, which can be a problem if you want to work several bands. If you have an antenna that is multi-band, you can put that right on the ground, 20-foot pole or 27-foot pole on the ground. It's going to be less visible than if you put that on the roof. And the radials, you don't need radials anymore. You don't need counterpoise, but you just need a bunch of radials that you don't need to have tune or anything. You put as long as possible, and if they are short, you put more to compensate, but that's still, you know, gonna work. And a vertical antenna, it's a pretty good antenna because all the vertical antenna, they have a very low takeoff angle, so you will be able to work you know, some long distance station, especially if you're in California. Most of the you know, I mean, in Oregon, most of the people, they're going to be, you're going to contact, they're going to be in Washington State or California. And then it's going to be a big jump to go on the East Coast of the US. There is no one in Nevada. There is no one in, you know, some of the states in the middle. Fan dipole, they work, same thing, depend on how many bands you want to work. If you do a fan dipole for 2 bands, 40 and 20, it's going to be easy. 40, 20, and 10, that's still going to be okay. But if you want to add, you know, 80, or if you want to add more bands, that's going to be a trick to build that fan dipole, because all the wires there interact with each other, and you know, the more wire you're going to put, and the harder it's going to be to build that antenna. Half wave and fed antenna, I don't like them. The thing, they work well with QRP or people who do SOTA, because they're easy to deploy. They just throw that in the tree, and then they are the counterpoise. Half wave and fed, you're gonna have a common mode current, and sometime, especially if you want to work with 100 watts, it's going to be hard to block that current. So you're going to need to put several chokes, balance to block that common mode current. Even if you put a radial, or if you ground your antenna, you're still going to have the feed line is still going to be used as part of your antenna, and that's going to be a problem. I mean, it's manageable, but it's something you need to work on. Loop antenna, they work pretty well. The problem is you need to tune them for every frequency you want to work. So having an automatic tuner on those loop antenna, it's kind of, you know, a big help. And you said before, don't use them inside the house, especially if you have your house with a stucco, because stucco is a mesh of chicken wire with some concrete on top. So basically, you live in the Faraday cage. So if you put your antenna inside your house with with stucco all around, you have no radiation going out, and everything stay inside. And someone was talking about radiation before. If you're transmitting with some power, that's going to be bad. But usually they're used for low power, up to 20-25 watts. And gutters, that can work depending on what kind of gutters you have. And they, that doesn't work with gutters made of PVC. A lot of houses now have gutters made of PVC. That won't work.
It's always fun to try other, things, and that's, I think, where the bed spring contest came from, is that people are like, well, let's give it a try and see what happens. But if you really want an efficient antenna, you kind of got to think of the traditional ones. The one that go ahead.
The thing I like is a random wire antenna. It's kind of the half wave, end-fed half wave. It's a non-resonant wire. You can put on the eave of your house. Under the eave of your house, you can put a tuner, and then you put a wire going to trees and your fence. They can loop around, and they don't have to be straight, like you said. And the tuner is at the antenna, meaning it's going to tune basically anything. It's going to be more or less efficient, but it's going to tune basically anything. So you need to ground that thing. You need to put some chokes, but it's going to be more efficient on a half wave with a long run of coax.
And there are, they do call them random wire antennas, but like you mentioned, Fred, you want to cut it so that it's not resonant on any band
frequency. Yeah.
And there's actually lists of random lengths that they recommend you use. And let me just pull up.
I have a program on my GitHub account where you put all the bands you want to work, and it will calculate the length of your wire.
That's great.
It will calculate the length you don't want to cut your wire.
That makes sense. Yeah, this is just an example of a simple, like, you don't want to use these. If you're going to do one for 20 meters, don't use 33 feet because that's a half wave antenna. They do have, here's the suggestions for lengths that you could use. Actually, no, I'm sorry. This is still don't use. I think this is these would be good long wire, random wire antennas. So you'll see a couple of the popular ones are 29 feet, 35.5 feet, 41 feet.
So the thing you need to know is if you want, you need to cut the wire for the lowest frequency you want to work with. So if you want to work 80 meters with 29 foot, your wire is going to be too short. You will never work that band.
Yeah, that's true. The other antenna that I didn't actually put up on the list is the magnetic loop antenna. Some people love them, some people hate them, but they're not necessarily really efficient on 40 meters and below, but for 20 meters, they can actually, in 10 and 15 meters, they can be pretty nice antennas. So it's essentially, it's a loop of some type, and it's, the smallest I've seen is probably, this is the Alex loop, and it's a couple feet, probably 3 feet wide with the larger loop, and then a small loop at the top that's less than a foot. And so this loop can either be used horizontally or vertically. It does have some directionality to it. So you'll notice that as you turn or rotate the antenna, you will start to hear, like if you hear a strong signal and then you rotate it, you'll actually can null the signal out. The only thing about loop antennas is that they tend to have very high Q, which means that they're where you have the antenna tuned for low SWR, you just go up a couple of kilohertz or down a couple of kilohertz, and then you'll actually have a pretty bad SWR. So at the base of the antenna, typically, where to see that? There we go. So at the base of the antenna of a lot of these, they'll be either a knob, or some of the more fancy ones will actually have a stepper motor that will then retune the antenna for a low SWR.
Don't, when you're transmitting, don't touch the antenna. I mean, that what I'm saying, it's for any antenna, but this one particularly because you have several thousands of volts near the capacitor, near the tuning circuit.
Yes. And a lot of most of the mag loops, I would say, are really for 20 watts and below. They do get a lot more expensive if you're using more than 20 watts, just because the voltages multiply exponentially when you're going up in power. So they do make mag loops for 100 watts. They are just a lot more expensive because they have to use a lot larger capacitors at the base or at the top, depending on which one you have. So it's just an idea of a way. So here's somebody that they can just put it horizontally off of a balcony, and they just attach it temporarily to the balcony. And on the inside of the box here is this is an air variable capacitor for larger, or if you're going to use 100 watts, typically it's not air variable. It's actually a vacuum tube capacitor. Cool. Any thoughts?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Again, back in my situation, the high rise, I put a picture there, which is looking the other direction. You can actually see large mountain in the distance, and there's a little mag mount antenna on top of that steel pergola, which seems to me to make a nice ground plane. It's 1/4-inch steel plate. We've found on one occasion we were inadvertently using the same frequency as the Skamania County Aries, which is about 30 or 40 miles up the river. But to think about doing high frequency from up there, you can't see it, but the building's actually quite long, and it would be possible to put some sort of an end fed or random wire or other device anchoring one end to this pergola. And there's a place at the far end where I could secure it at maybe 15 feet above the deck. So then the transmitter could be out of the weather back behind where this photo was taken. So the question is, what do you do about grounding in a situation like that? And I noticed there's this steel rail that's down at waist level. And so I ponder that, and I think, is there any chance of kind of using the building's steel as a ground, or is that wrong for some reason? I don't know how to evaluate that without doing empirical tests.
I can answer that question. One of the first thing I would try if I was in your situation, I will use that railing.
Yes.
You can get you have those Joe clamps that you can with you have a clamp on one side, and on the other side you have a mount for something to screw an antenna and to screw a coaxial cable. I would use that because there is a chance if you want to work on 20 meter, 15 meter, or 10 meter. I mean, any band below 20 meter, I'm pretty sure that will work. That will work okay. You may have a surprising good antenna if you are doing that. One of the things you can do, you can look at MFJ. I don't remember the reference of, but you look at a telescopic antenna. Mm-hmm. And you have one that is 5 meter long, so meaning it's a 1/4 wavelength for on 20, and you just you can use that antenna for any band, you know, from 20 and up, because you just need to collapse few elements. You just need to you know, calculate the length, and that should work pretty well.
Mhm. I was wondering about 40 meters at least for NVIS, and whether to string horizontal counterpoise.
So
or
40
use-
meter,
use
40
a rail
meter,
as a counterpoise.
for 40 meter, that's easy. You go on your roof and you put a dipole. You don't need to have to put that high up or anything. You just put a dipole. You don't have to have a ground. You don't have to have anything. Just you know, you just have to string that dipole between two, you know, two sides of your building, and you should be able to work 40 meter and NVIS.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks. Yeah, that's a little bit more awkward, and the main problem is more political rather than engineering problem. But thanks. That's helpful perspective on that. I appreciate your comments.
Yeah, the politics, that's your neuro side. I cannot advise you on that.
Yeah, no, and we're making gradual progress on that. We'll see where it leads.
Can I share my screen?
Yeah.
Share screen. So that's the clamp I'm talking about.
Oh, yes.
So on that screw here, you put your you screw your antenna. On the other side, you have your maybe there is another pitch. Oh yeah, that's there. You put a coax on the other side. I don't know how this one works. I have one like that. I use it all the time. It's very convenient.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
I was going to say that that nut actually looks like it would fit ham sticks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But don't use a ham stick. A ham stick, you're gonna have the same problem you have with a mag loop. They're very, very narrow. They're high Q. So every time you want to work, you know, different frequency, you need to retune that thing. And it's and on an ham stick is very hard to tune. It's even harder than on a loop. If you want to work FT8, for example, you can use 2 ham sticks, and you can build a dipole with 2 ham sticks, because you're going to tune them, and then FT8 is always on the same frequency. So once they're tuned, they're going to stay there, and you can work FT8 every day. You just have to set it up, and you can work FT8. But if you want to work FT8, a little bit of SSB, you know, move around, the ham stick is very not convenient for that.
And I do know that they make ham stick dipole mounting kits, so they look like the jaws, except it has a place to put 2 ham sticks on. And Roger, if you know anybody that has a mag loop antenna, you may try that if there's an open area to sit out on your rooftop that doesn't have the your wonderful ground plane above you.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Joe Hubert about that. I don't know if you know him. He's involved with Aries. But he was suggesting that, and there was one that he really liked where the diameter was about 8 feet.
Oh wow, that's fairly large.
Kind of costly capacitor to run the thing. I told him, well, you know, aside from all the political considerations, that wouldn't fit in the elevator.
Yeah. Well, a lot of they will roll up into a very, very small case, but 8 feet still, that's in a balcony like yours or the rooftop like yours, that would be a little bit awkward.
So I have a one like that where you can put a ham stick on that side and ham stick on this side, and then the coax here.
Oh, there you go. Yep. So essentially the ground of the coax is connected to one of the ham sticks, and then
Yeah.
the center is connected to the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
Now the bracket on that one looks like it's designed to mount on the mirror of a semi-trailer rig.
Or a pole or something like that.
Or a car luggage rack. And I've read that you get into difficulties with grounding if you try to use the luggage rack. That it may not really have a good connection to the rest of the car.
I don't. The thing is, I don't know if you want to drive your car with a dipole on the roof.
Yeah, especially 40 meters.
Yeah.
No, I'm just really just sort of exploring possibilities. You come up with all these miscellaneous questions about the details, you know. So, but the mechanics of those things.
I think the
handy.
best
Yep.
the best thing to do is to when you want to do something like that, you talk to people around you. You go to the club and you talk to people at the club. You know, some people, they're gonna have some ideas. They're gonna tell you, oh, for what you want to do, you need to that you're gonna be fine, or you need to scale down your, you know, what you want to do because you know, if the HOA, you will, that's going to be a nightmare to do those things. I mean, they're going to give you some advice, some ideas, and things like that.
Yeah, the other thing, because Roger and some other people, you know, you do have a very challenging area, and maybe it's better or not necessarily more convenient not to move, yeah, but yeah, to go
to Wyoming,
yeah, to go to somebody else's house if you're doing a contest or something like that.
Yeah.
Because yours is probably one of the more challenging places to put up an antenna. Excuse me. Cool. Any other questions about or comments about stealth antennas or HOA restrictions? Anything about ham radio in general? So one of the things I learned this last Monday is Pacificon is actually scheduled for in person this year. And I was going to pull up their website. I went to it a couple of years ago. It's a great ham fest right in Fred's back neighborhood. It's middle of October, and it's over in San Ramon, and they have it at the Marriott there. It's one of the larger ones on the West Coast, and I don't know if they're doing anything online, which has been all the rage for the pandemic, but they have a lot of speakers. And they even have some kit building. I guess that's for the speaker sign up. They have a banquet. They have a new swap meet, and they also have which is people bring a lot of used gear. You can get a lot of antenna connectors or wire and other things like that. But there's also a lot of new gear on sale at these events. And you'll have to excuse me for just a second. I got to go get something to drink.
How is the fire situation where you are? Do you guys get smoke from the fires?
No evidence here.
Not in the Portland area so far. The year or two ago, we've had some things off to the east that were problematic. Right now, the fires are worst in Southern Oregon.
So you don't have any power problems or things like that?
Well, we have the power poles from time to time. You know, if we get enough of a windstorm, or an ice storm, that's quite an issue because we have lots of trees. And so you get ice in the tree and the tree falls down, hits the power line, and you get an arc, and that's potential. We had, so again, maybe a year and a half ago, we had quite a worrisome situation with a couple of hundred of those events all at the same time, all over the city, and it kept the fire department quite busy. And I'm impressed with their work. I mean, we could have had a really serious local mess here, but they managed to stay ahead of it.
Yeah, Texas was a mess with that, big cold they had this year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we live out. It's just outside of Oregon City, and it's not a very big city, but and we do have a large power substation, less than 1,000 feet from my house. It's very RF quiet, so we've never had any issues with it. So they do maintain it really well. But this last year, we actually lost power, which is really unusual for this area, twice for multiple days. The last one being the big ice storm that we had in February, and the power was out for 7 days. Not that there were power lines down between the power station and my house. It was all the other streets in, around the area that they didn't want to energize. And the other big worry, of course, and they're already sending messages this year, is the wildfires. So again, it may not be something that's within 10 miles of our house, but they may de-energize the substation if they feel like the high winds or the fires are going to affect the surrounding area. So we ended up buying a generator because of that, and it's a dual fuel generator that's come in actually very handy. We only use it on propane just because it's so much easier to deal with propane than pouring gas into a generator. Yeah, a lot of the people that are in the club are very interested in backup power simply because they are part of the CERT, or they also call them NET, up here in Portland. So a lot of people do that have the money. They will buy, the Gentrack generators that will power their house.
The thing that starts automatically, and it's on. Yeah, those are pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, here in California, it's the same thing. There is not a single year without a lot of power outage because of the fire, because of the wind, because of same problem, the trees falling on the lines, and the lines they haven't been maintained for a long time, so now they're kind of falling all over the place. And that's something that I've been looking at, a power generator, at least to maintain the fridge, and in the winter, the furnace runs on gas, but if you don't have electricity, nothing runs. So at least to power that thing, so we don't freeze to death if there is a power problem.
Yeah. So and I have not done this yet because we just bought the generator a few months ago, but we also bought a generator.
The transfer switch?
Yes, the transfer switch. Yep. So we can do 10 circuits, switch them in and out of the generator. So when I get a free moment here someday, we'll pick 10 circuits and put them on. We were fortunate enough to be able to borrow a generator from somebody that did not lose power in Portland. And that helped a lot, because then we could keep the refrigerator and freezer going. And I was able to rewire the hot water heater to accept 110. So we had hot showers at least, and just the microwave and things like that, but not all at once, obviously. So it had to be either one or the other. But it helped a lot.
Do you keep your radio with a battery and a trickle charger to top up the batteries, and the radio are working all the time on the battery, or something like that?
So I built a Go box that I keep here in the office all the time, and it's actually, for right now at least, my primary UHF radio. And that's powered by a 30 amp hour Bioenno battery. And because I use it a lot, I end up just leaving it kind of plugged in, and it will use its own internal battery management system to keep it. And it's kind of fun because then I got to play around with it a little bit. And I do have a watt meter so that I can measure the electricity needed to power different appliances. So, and I have the adapters and things, the cigarette lighter adapter, but I mainly use power poles whenever I can, just to make everything kind of interchangeable. And then I do have another battery that's fairly popular right now with people that are getting into emergency power for your radio, is the valent batteries, the green ones that are usually used for hospitals and other medical equipment. And so,
how do you call them?
VALENT, I think. And if you just look on eBay, that's where they're most popular, because to buy them new is, $1,000 or more. But on the used market, they're only a few $100s. They used to be less, but now because they've become so popular, they've gone way up in price. Let me try to find.
Oh, it's a lithium battery.
Yeah. It's a LiFePO.
Oh, because the one I have here is lithium. So lithium, I don't want that. It's too. They're a pain to maintain.
Yeah, no, these are LiFePO, but they are. They do have their own battery management system built into them. And I'm not getting the right spelling for it.
So it's VALENCE.
That's it. Thank you.
Look kind of cool.
Yeah, and they come in 40 amp hour, and then I think 100 and something amp hour. And the 40 amp hours looks like they're running 200, and then the 138 amp hour runs 500 and more. You can chain them together, and they come with special connectors that you can use for chaining them together. They used to be a lot less expensive when they were a little bit less known. And you can charge them with SLA battery chargers. They're expensive. I still do like the Bioenno power batteries. They have their own BMS built into them. They do come with a 2-year warranty, and they really have a good reputation with ham radio community. I see Denny's joined. Hey, Denny. Well, cool. Any other questions before we wrap up this session? Any topics that you guys want to cover in the future? I'm going to pull up my presentation and show you the upcoming topics that we have. Maidenhead grids and contesting. And then we have operating in other countries, third-party traffic, 6 meters, Skywarn, and Yagi antennas.
I have a sudden interest in WinLink and my TNC, so I could really use some guidance with that.
Absolutely, and I think we do have WinLink on the schedule, but let me just make sure, because if we don't, that's a big miss on our part. Actually, you know what? We had it already back in end of April. So make sure you take a look at that presentation. It's on our YouTube page.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
I'm not an expert on WinLink, so Bruce AA7PB, he was the presenter from Portland Net that gave that presentation. And that was back in April 29th.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.